And we're back with another episode of Double Buffs. This is an NALCS Esports podcast hosted by myself, Gregory Piantedosi, and joined with me today is my co-host, Cristiano Attacalite. We release podcast episodes once a week every Thursday later in the day. Talk about the previous week's matches, the upcoming week's matches, and all of the different interviews and esports content we consume over the course of the week. As always, Cristiano, how are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a little bit of a cloudy one outside, a little rainy. I feel like we've gotten like an ocean's worth of rain this summer. It hasn't been dry like more than 2 days in a row.
Yeah, we're both from Mass, and I completely agree that,
Yeah. So I
Northeast
only am
Coast.
getting enough vitamin D. I think I'm feeling a little bit. What's a sad seasonal? Um,
Depression?
yeah,
Depression?
yeah, where you get depressed in the winter. I'm feeling it. It's
In the
basically that.
summer? Oh, no.
Yeah,
Winter's right around the corner. Jeez.
yeah, we got the extra long.
All right. Anyways, so last week on the Double Buffs podcast, you said we would see who is the buffest of the doubles in
Mm-hmm.
reference to 100 Thieves versus TSM. And lo and behold, I am the buffest of the doubles. TSM stomped 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves
It
fans go
hurts.
cry and weep in the corner.
That's me crying and weeping in the corner. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of
Oh,
it's sort
you
of
paused.
cemented. I paused.
Restart whatever you were saying.
Okay. Um, it's pretty tragic. It's kind of made me partially because of this, other reasons, but it's made me start to rethink 100 Thieves as sort of like a top contender. And I feel like they're kind of going on a pretty deep slide here. I'm not so convinced on them anymore because we have these other teams like TL, C9 starting to ramp up. TSM is showing, I'll give them, okay, they're showing some consistency now. I can get behind that. Um, and yeah, that's basically how it's morphed my feeling. Is my Wi-Fi okay? Did
I,
I cut out?
I hope. I don't know if it's you or if it's me because I don't have the best Wi-Fi connection right now. But anyways, we'll just try to
Mm.
go on. If there's Wi-Fi problems, apologize in advance.
Okay.
But one thing that was highlighted to me in this series, at least, was the draft. I think TSM has been drafting really well, especially the last 4 weeks. It does seem like they're kind of one step ahead of the meta, maybe alongside Evil Geniuses. Um, but
Mhm.
arguably, TSM has been playing the cleanest League of Legends as of late. I think a lot of people would agree with that. They've kind of incrementally been ramping up as the split goes on, taking their time and improving. And I really like their composition this past week. They played a Cassiopeia Jin composition. And one of the things with Jin is that
Mhm.
in just the 80 carry lane in general, especially in terms of like objectives when you're on Baron or Dragon, Jin is pretty bad at having the DPS to power through these objectives. Like Callista is a really powerful pick right now because she's good at lane and she's pretty good on dragons. Obviously,
Yeah.
she can stack up that Ren and stuff. But Jin's damage is really concentrated and it's much more burst focus. So even though he's kind of a good pick, he has all this long range engage that you can kind of like. Sometimes you want to engage out of your 80 carry position. Not many champions can do that other than like
Yeah.
Varus, Ashe. Jin is also one of them. And when you pair that up with the Cassiopeia, who actually has one of the highest DPS out of any champion in the game, we even saw a Baron play where Power of Evil was on Cassiopeia and they just shredded Baron so fast. None of them took any damage, and it's a really good composite. It's a really good complement to the Jin because now you don't have that consistent DPS coming out of your 80 carry, but you
Ah,
can get it out of the
yes.
Cassiopeia in the mid lane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the comp right now. So they had that Cassiopeia in the mid lane, the Jin in the ADC spot, and they also had Viego and Diana, and then Leona. And I'm looking at the composition sort of as a whole, and I'm really liking it for TSM because one of their big strengths, everyone has always said for a few seasons now, is kind of that late game team fighting, right? And this comp just has so much zone control with that long range Leona ultimate. Your miasma, you lie down on the ground as Cassiopeia. Jin ults coming through, Jin W's coming through. Um, Diana is like kind of zone control on her, even on her own, because you don't want to afford her like a single jump so she can double jump into your backline. So that kind of warps like these objective fights as well. And so, like you said, I really like this draft, and I think it plays really well into TSM's strengths without exposing too many weaknesses. We've seen Huni on
Yeah.
Viego, we've seen Sword Art is like a Leona aficionado at this point. Power of Evil, these control mages are his forte. So yeah, good props to TSM.
And also, like, just the mid lane pool in general kind of has, we've seen a lot of shakeups recently. We're seeing the Cassiopeia, we're seeing Syndra come back a little bit, we're seeing Azir come back a little bit. I think I'm kind of surprised we're actually seeing so much Syndra recently. I'm not like completely sure why, because I feel like I'm not that impressed when I see it in these games. It just doesn't feel very strong right now. I don't know. Maybe you pick it because you want a safer pick, and mages are generally safer picks in the mid lanes. So maybe if like a Rise is banned or if an Ori's off the table, you're going to pick up the Syndra. Maybe the burst is kind of like slightly preferable to the damage burst second from an Azir, who maybe is more maximized against tank compositions, while the only like kind of tanks in the meta are like Nautilus and Leona. We are seeing some Ornn, so that's where an Azir can shine as well. But a Syndra ultimate can also kind of just as easily blow up a Nautilus or a Leona as an Azir can. So I guess that's maybe why we're seeing more Syndra than Azir, on top of the fact that you technically can like flex Syndra to the bot lane, which is kind of a plus in draft. But at the same time, when I see it like piloted by like players like Danny and other players, it just doesn't feel that it just feels kind of weak to me. I think it's because like when you're introducing mages to a player that only plays AD carries, they can't seem to really maximize the nitty gritty aspects of the champion like a mid laner can. And also, one second, let me read something really fast. And oh yeah, and also like having a mage in the bot lane versus the mid lane, experience definitely matters kind of a lot. Maybe I'm the one that's pausing. I hope I'm not, but
No, no, I think
I'll
that was
re-say
me.
that
Yeah,
point.
should be good.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
wait.
So
So,
basically,
mostly you want, yeah,
wait. I had another
go.
point. So basically, like when you have like a mage in the bot lane versus an AD carry, mages rely a lot more on levels than AD carries do, because a lot of your damage comes from abilities. So when you're sharing XP with a duo lane, like when you have a Syndra with a support, you're getting less levels. So already when Syndra's kind of weak in the mid lane, and then you put her in the bot lane when she's so like level reliant, she's the scaling mid lane. It feels really strange to me. Like the same drawback doesn't really happen when you put an AD carry into the mid lane. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one little tidbit I know is that one of the reasons Syndra fell out of favor in the meta was because her mana costs were increased and they were, seen as a little restrictive. But they actually have just been lowered. So it could even be something simple like these professional players just want to like test the viability of Syndra, because we just saw like a little sprinkling of it, right? Like a few games. Because otherwise, I kind of agree with you. It feels like I prefer to see a more specialized pick, like a pick that is better for a late game, maybe doesn't have that early game burst, or
Actually, I have an interesting
yeah,
point on that like mana thing that you just mentioned.
yeah,
I
what's
think one of
up?
the reasons, one of the things with the meta as of late, and mages have kind of just like fallen out of favor a lot, at least in solo queue. I was reading, I think it was a Reddit comment, and it was really good analysis, because like
Mm-hmm.
one of the things with having all these assassins in the mid lane is that they're not like as mana reliant as some of these mages, especially like these energy champions like Akali or getting the airflow and
I
stuff
yeah,
like
I
that.
hope.
So like when a Syndra or like an Orianna runs out of mana and they literally have to back just because their mana's at zero, and then they have
Mhm.
to wait in base for like 5 to 10 extra seconds. Even when their health bar is low, they have to wait even longer to get their mana to
Yeah,
full, which like energy champions like Akali don't even they don't need to like wait for their mana. In that extra like 5 to 10 seconds every time you back, they have to wait for your mana bar to increase in the fountain. That's actually kind of like a big deal over the course of the game when you're like
Hmm.
just seconds behind a play, which is pretty
Yeah, I
cool.
mean, I've been playing a lot of mid lane recently, and I can't tell you like the amount of times where you'll back the enemy mid laner will manage to push your wave into your tower before you get back, and then they have a roam timing, and despite how much you ping your bot lane, they don't pay attention, and this dive happens bot lane or whatever because maybe you're spending that extra 5 seconds where you get pushed in, and now you have to be the one pushing the wave all the way back out
And then
instead
your
of
bot lane flames you, and it's all your
yeah.
fault, even though
And
you
so
pinked.
that 5 seconds can be really important because even if you get there in time to contest the wave a little bit, all of a sudden the enemy laner has to be there to catch the incoming wave because they just the way the waves
Yeah,
bounce.
wave management. Yeah, and that's a huge aspect of like at least higher ELOs is wave management. And like when
Yeah.
you're off by 5 seconds, it completely changed the state of the lane. And you know, so we also in another lens or just changing the conversation.
Yeah.
We have playoffs coming up this weekend,
Oh yeah.
and first we can talk about Cloud9 versus Team Liquid. They are our fourth and fifth seed teams. Who do you think is going to win that series? And what are you thinking?
Okay, so I've been thinking hard about this. Um, so I'll give you what I think up front about who's going to win. Personally, I am favoring TL in this matchup. I think that the variability that C9 has been showing in their play, memes like Blabber Scuttle have popped up over the split for a reason. He Cloud9 is flipping coins in a lot of these kind of weird. Or I say Cloud9, right? Not TSM. Yeah,
Yeah,
I did. They're flipping these weird coins sometimes, and against another top team, that can be the game, something like that. And we saw that at MSI, and so I feel like that's essentially what this comes down to in a big way too. Is in the bot lane. I feel as though like both of the top laners are pretty strong. Do you dispute that? I think
no,
like
yeah,
on any given
I agree.
day, Fudge or Alfari could come out on top depending on like jungle matchup, lane matchup, stuff like that. So I feel like where the biggest disparity is down that bot lane where we have Sven and Tactical, and I feel like Sven has been you've been kind of echoing this a little weird, a little shaky. I was looking at some of his stats. I was digging deep, um, and some of these key picks you got to be able to play and succeed on, and one of those being Varus, where Sven has like an abysmal win rate on this champion.
Mm.
And on the mirror side of that, Tacticals is like the roof. He has like an 80% win rate over 10 games, I think. And
Mm.
so it's small things like this when the teams are so even that I feel like are really going to break this matchup. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
a good
what do you
point.
think?
Like one like when one team can't really maximize a meta pick, it
Mm-hmm.
like completely can shape an entire series because then like either Cloud9's having to ban the Varus game after game and then C9 gets a free, ban in that sense,
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
they can actually play the Varus. So that can definitely come up in a series. I listened to interviews from both Santorin and Jensen this past weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Santorin said he's feeling a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
But he also hasn't really been playing solo queue during his break. He just took like a complete reset from the game to focus on his health. So he actually feels like completely better, but he normally has a really like wide champion pool from like what he's saying, but he doesn't feel like his skills on each of the different champions is maximized right now. Like he wants more practice on all the different champions so he
Makes
can
sense.
really like, because you need to practice all of them to be able to pick them out in a series. And both of him and Jensen feel really confident going into this series. They're saying Jensen cited that kind of Santorin style fits Team Liquid, like their lane assignments and things of that nature, a lot better than Griggs did because
Mm-hmm.
when a new player comes into a team, you don't want to completely change their style because that can be more detrimental than it can like be beneficial. And we even saw last split. Team Liquid with Greg took C9 to 5 games. And now that they have Santorin back, even though he hasn't been with the team as long, I also think that Team Liquid's going to win the series, even though Cloud9 beat them this weekend. I think a lot of people are predicting Cloud9, but I don't know. I think Santorin and the team with another week of practice are just going to look so much better.
Yeah, I really think as well. I mean, I guess I spoke about. Oh, never mind. This is a wash. Actually, I was gonna say I really liked Alfari's like willingness to play stuff like Malphite, and then I remember back to the lock-in tournament where I think Fudge locked in the Malphite in one of the games. So I guess they're both willing to whip out picks like that when they see the opportunity,
Whoa,
the
whoa,
like
whoa, whoa.
keystone pick. Yeah,
Well, the
what
lock-in tournament, though, I feel like Malphite was like a clutch for
Oh yeah,
Fudge
because he
back
wasn't
then
so good.
because he
Yeah,
wasn't doing anything. So at least he has an impactful ultimate. But actually, he did play it a few more times with like Yasuo comps with perks in the mid lane. So I mean, Fudge has a
yeah,
massive champion pool, which could definitely come up in the series too. I think the
yeah.
biggest out of any top laner.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in the mid lane too, and I was thinking, what do I think about these two players? I thought to myself, well, I think the meta suits Perks a little more. You know, Jensen is more known for like his control mages, maybe his TF, which is a relevant pick right now. But you know, Perks is also going to be kind of contesting him for that pick. There's no guarantee you get it. They're both TF players. Um, but I saw TL picked up the Azir this weekend, which I was a little surprised about because we haven't seen much Azir at all this split.
Well,
And
we saw Azir popping up here and there, like kind of in
yeah,
the
every so
early
often.
on, but did
But
fall out of favor.
it looked surprisingly good. I was afraid it might fall a little far behind in tempo as like these picks that are a little weaker early might, but it seemed to have a good effect throughout the game. It kind of like stalemates whatever lane you're in because it's pretty hard to get close enough to really all in. You have a nice dash to get away from any all ins. So seeing that and how well it performed this weekend, it made me give the edge a little bit back more to Jensen, and that's just another reason why. And Perks has been getting caught like a madman. Those Leona roams
Yeah,
mid where he's not flashing them.
yeah, and he's getting like 1v1 by 80 carries. Perks
Mhm.
hasn't looked great, and I feel like with the addition of Santorin, Jensen this past weekend looks unlocked. Like he was playing Lulu mid,
Yeah,
he looks really good on that. Absorbed a ton of pressure. He looked superb on the Azir. Um, One thing about that Team Liquid versus Immortals game that comes to mind is Immortals picked the early Draven, and to counter it, Team Liquid went with a Thresh Caitlyn bot lane with Lulu in the mid lane, which is really comparable to what I was saying the other week with that like Tom Kench Lulu Kog'Maw composition, where you have like one champion that can save your 80 carry, and then you have one champion that can enhance it. So
hmm
Lulu's buffing up the Caitlyn, but then
yeah,
also like Thresh can save the Caitlyn. Meanwhile, with the other version of that, Lulu can buff up the Kog'Maw, and then Tom Kench can also save it in team fights. But I thought that was pretty cool. So we both think TL is going to win.
hmm
Um, but who do you
but
think's going to win the next series against TSM? The winner of that plays
against
TSM.
yeah, so against TSM. So I was praising TSM earlier. I actually think both of these options are a little tough for TSM. Because I think I'd say the weak points of TSM right now are in that 80 carry position, and you might contest me on this top with Huni. I don't know how you're feeling about Huni right now, but like we were saying, Team Liquid, Cloud9, they both have like superstar top laners that dominate matchups regularly. And if Huni has one of those weird sort of games where he's getting solo killed randomly in lane, stuff like that, which we saw earlier on in the split, I'm a little concerned for that. I feel like these players have the chops to expose him a little bit. Um, so as far as the jungle position, I think Spica has been great. I think it's pretty unanimously thought, right? I mean, who's denying that at this point? But at the same time, I feel like Blab. If any junglers in the league are going to be contesting Spica or like up to par, maybe playing up a level, it's going to be Blabber and Santorin. You know, Santorin is a veteran of this league. He's been really highly regarded, you know, the past couple of years. And
But
I mean,
we have to
Blabber,
remember
yeah,
Santorin's bit. He hasn't
yeah,
played in like 4 weeks.
that's true. Yeah. So maybe that tilts the matchup more into Spica's favor. Blabber, I don't know, man. Do you think Blabber is still good? I mean, maybe we should have talked about this for the last series, but
I mean, he's had an off split for sure, but I want to stick on TSM versus the winner of C9 versus TL a little
mhm,
bit longer. I think the
yeah.
biggest discrepancy in this matchup, where I think TSM has the biggest advantage, is with Bjergsen as coach. This is now his second
Ooh.
playoffs as coach. Not to jump ahead of myself, but I think the three teams that are going to be attending Worlds this year are Team Soul Mid, 100 Thieves, and Evil Geniuses. And I think a big part of that is actually the coaching infrastructure. 100 Thieves has Reaper, Evil Geniuses has Peter Dunn, and Team Soul Mid has Bjergsen. Meanwhile, on Cloud9 side, they have Mithy, I believe, who's kind of new to being the head coach, and they've had a lot of internal problems. And Team Liquid, I don't even know who the coach is. Is it cold right now? Like,
Exactly, yeah.
Jat literally fell out of, they don't have like a main coach. This roster, like, while good, they have a lot of strong pieces and Worlds experience. They
Mhm.
just, so much has gone wrong for them, where Alfari's been out for a bit, Santorin's been out. They're switching up their coach. I think Team Soul Mid's going to take that. I mean, last split, I thought Team Soul Mid was going to win against Team Liquid, and Alfari just absolutely dumpstered Huni, which, like, you know, if it's that day of the week, could definitely happen again. Where, um,
I like that
like,
day of the week.
because Huni's like one of his best skills is his team fighting and his like macro after the
Mhm.
lane phase. Sometimes he has a tendency to get behind in lane, and
Yeah.
Alfari is kind of like the number one player in the league at pushing a lane advantage. So I think that's the avenue for Team Liquid to win. But we
Mhm.
have seen like how great Speak of Synergy is with Huni as of late. And then I think the mid lane's overall like neutralized. I think bot lane kind of like favors Team Liquid a little bit, I'd say. But like overall, I just think TSM's cohesiveness and their continuity, they've been ramping up. It seems like they're ahead of the meta. They have all these different picks now. They're flexing different picks. And they have Bjergsen as coach too. I think Team Solomid's going to take that series.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, like you say, I think maybe top lane could be okay. Huni could maybe carry his weight later on in the game. But when I look at that bot lane, man, I mean, Core JJ or Vulcan, whichever one makes it through, are like people's contenders for top support in the whole league. And usually people will slot Sword Art after them. And 80 carries, I think, lost is, TSM is probably due for an upgrade. Let's put it that way.
I mean, dude,
Uh,
I just have to disagree because like people
really?
have been saying this like all split long and before the split, and it's just not how it's played out at all. Like you can say all you want about like Core JJ being great, but he's honestly been terrible this split. Tactical looks a
I
lot
think
better,
so.
but like he's not 1v9 in games any more than Lost is. Like Tactical looks good on Varus. You know,
I don't know,
I,
man. I
I just
think
have to disagree with you. Like Vulcan's been pretty decent, but still Cloud9 has looked not great. I mean, when it comes
well,
down to it, I think all of our top five teams have like clear weaknesses. I just think
mhm.
that Team Solo Mid's cohesiveness is just above any other team. Maybe Evil Genius's cohesiveness in the middle of like a chaotic team fight is comparable, but from like the start of the game to the end of the game, I think Team Solo Mid is probably the favorite to win this split.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
we're also at 23 minutes, so if
We
you have
gotta
another
get going.
point, you can come back to it, but let's just move on to
Okay.
Golden Guardians versus the loser of C9 versus Team Liquid, which is actually kind of an interesting, series to talk about because Golden Guardians have looked really good recently. They've looked much better with Licorice. I think they're kind of trying to do a little too much where they're finding a little too many counter picks. Like they picked out Singed into Gwen this past weekend, and they pick out Tom Kench in the mid lane, Calista in the mid lane. They have a lot of flavor and big champion pools, but they acquired Licorice a little too late in the season to be doing too much of that kind of
Mhm.
experimenting, I feel like. So, I mean, maybe if they were together for a full year, I could see Golden Guardians taking the series. I think they have a lot of nice young pieces like a Blaze Olive and Chimes. But I
Mhm.
think Cloud9 and Team Liquid just having the playoff experience are going to take that series. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Golden Guardians somehow, takes it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I touched on it earlier. I feel like these lower seed teams almost never have a chance against the upper teams in these best of five formats. Best of ones, we see them look all right because you even mentioned they pull out some like interesting picks, some effective picks. Unless you like really play around that and you play into that and you like have a whole roster of these interesting picks lined up, I feel like you just get exposed the large majority of the time in best of fives. Yeah, I think GG's out first round, and there it is. Not much more to it.
All right, and then on the other side of the bracket, we have Evil Geniuses versus Dignitas, our
Mm-hmm.
third versus sixth place teams. I mean, there's not much to say. I think everyone's kind of picking Evil Geniuses to win this series. But
Yeah.
what I do want to say is that I just want to cite one game. Or, for
Mm-hmm.
example, Cloud9 played Dignitas this past weekend, and they absolutely stopped them. They finished the game in 20 to 2 kills. But what's crazy is that for like a small portion of this game, Dig didn't even seem that far behind. Yusui got a couple of kills on Irelia, who he actually looks relatively clean on.
Mm-hmm.
Yusui, we've given him some, hate as of late because he hasn't looked quite as good as maybe Soligo did in the past, in my opinion at least. But he looked pretty clean on Aurelia. He got a couple kills. They were getting stomped, but they actually seemed like they were kind of in it. They had some close fights. And then all of a sudden, it's 27 minutes in, it's 20 to 2 kills, and they lose. And I think in a series against any of these other top teams, Dignitas, that type of game where they just like automatically lose somehow is going to happen in every series. So basically, how I view
Mm-hmm.
it is like whatever team Dignitas is going to play out of these top five teams, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, etc., they're basically going into at least in my mind, they're going into the series starting down 0-1. So
Mm-hmm.
they have to win three, like 3 out of 4 games, which is just so difficult. But what I will say is I think EG is actually their best matchup stylistically out of any of the other top teams. And this is why. This is why. I say that because EG is debatably the most aggressive team in the tournament, whereas Dignitas's best strength is team fighting, which is also one of Evil Genius's strengths is team fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So if EG somehow doesn't, roll over the early game, then Dignitas's like synergy and team fight can kind of make up for that skill disparity that between like a Yusui or like a Jizuke. Like their synergy can kind of make up for that disparity during the team fights. Like they can be on par with EG's raw skill if they can
Mm-hmm.
neutralize the early game, which is a big if. I don't think it's going to happen, but if they somehow manage to do that, then I think that's their avenue to winning. Still predicting 3-0 for Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, I gotta get on that train too. I mean, you wanted to talk about one game. Let me talk about one game. That one where in the EG versus Dignitas matchup, Impact broke the world or the LCS record for highest gold difference at 15
Oh,
minutes.
damn.
He's over 4,000 gold up on poor fake god. I
Right.
really don't give Dignitas anything. An interesting angle I think we could take is thinking a little bit about. I mean, I can see Evil Geniuses being comfortable putting contracts in this matchup. Um, because he's a little less proven and maybe give him some of that, best of five experience that you could come in handy later. I mean, certainly. That's kind of the only fun angle I
I
kind of
mean,
like.
I
Yeah.
like that angle. I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
they've been kind of like playing maybe best of fives against their academy, so they don't have
Yep.
to
Sure.
even give him that experience, so they can kind of hide him for later rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like if you think you're gonna win this and you think contracts is practice enough, the winner of the next series, Evil Geniuses versus 100 Thieves, is what we're both predicting, right? The winner of that goes to Worlds. So that means one of
Yep.
TSM, at least one of TSM, TL, and C9 isn't going. One of 100 Thieves or Evil Geniuses going. And I think that's one of the biggest X factors in that series is contracts, like you're saying.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, I was taking a look because I asked the question a few episodes ago, I think, about, what does contracts bring to the roster over Svensker? And as of right now, I still don't feel like very much. I think maybe this is more like a development thing rather than a we think Contracts brings like all this extra value, because I'm looking at the champions they play. It's largely the same. Svenskeren has a clean 100% win rate on Diana and Viego. Lovely. And when you look at his CS leads, this is basically like the main point where they differ. Svenskeren tends to have a higher CS lead, which speaks to me that maybe his pathing is a little bit better. He's a little more experienced with that kind of aspect of the game, maybe invading. So yeah, I'd like to see Contracts give him some experience.
Well, it's also, I mean, that's true, but you can have refined like strategies with Contracts that like Contracts is practicing, and then he brings out like, well, one, if you're tilting, right? If you go down 0-2, then it's the perfect time to bring in a new player, just kind of give the team a breath of fresh air, someone that's not necessarily tilted, but also just a different look and a different dynamic within the team. Because like you have a different voice. Jungle is one of those positions where a lot of the shot calling comes from. So when you have like Svenskeren in the game, he's going to be thinking one way, and then when you have Contracts, he's going to be thinking one way, and it makes everyone else react differently. And 100 Thieves has been scrimming a ton, presumably against Evil Geniuses and against Svenskeren, but probably not as much against Contracts. So maybe they you can't really like. One of the things that's good about having this like 6-man is like 100 Thieves can't practice like an anti-Svenskeren strategy. Like they're like, okay, we're going to ban Diana and we're going to ban Viego, and then we're going to pick this champion, which Svenskeren also plays, and that's how we're going to win the series. Oh, we just subbing Contracts, we just wasted 3 days of practice.
Yeah, that's what would really get me up out of my seat. If we see something like, well, I guess you don't know beforehand if they're going to ban you out, but if we see Contracts slotted in and he picks maybe a slightly unorthodox champion.
Shaco Jungle.
Or Shaco Jungle. Is he known for Shaco and solo queue or something?
No, he's not.
I was trying to hunt down his solo queue accounts to see what he's been playing. It was too much. It was too much for me, though. I couldn't figure it out.
I was going to say, maybe he's being sneaky and practicing something. No.
Yeah. So, but I didn't see anything. But that would be my absolute dream if they slot him in with like a specific strategy in mind. Yeah, like you were saying.
I mean, I think that's what they are doing. But anyways, who do you think is going to win that next series between Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves?
I got to give it to Evil Geniuses. I feel like they're still kind of hitting their peak, or like at their peak right now. Whereas I feel like 100 Thieves peaked long ago. And I think it was Perks in an interview said something about how he thinks like that early dominance by 100 Thieves, a lot of it was due on they had like a really good meta read early on in the split, and they were kind of a little bit ahead of everyone else. Stuff like the karma that we saw.
I think Jensen said that.
Maybe it was Jensen. Yeah. And I just don't think that pound for pound they're matching up to Evil Geniuses right now.
Yeah. So my opinion on this series is like, obviously we have 5 really good teams, as we talked about, everyone in the league's talked about. I think what it comes down to, which you can kind of see in both interviews and in the game, is that Evil Geniuses players just seem like they're hungrier than 100 Thieves. Agreed. Abadage said in an interview, like, he just kind of plays League for fun. He's not that competitive. He's more of a casual. You see Impact kind of like, absolutely stomping games. You see Jizuke going in for all these fights. You see their management. They're doing 2 different like junglers. Ignar is quietly like been a really, really good support for Evil Geniuses. You got Danny, who I think could be exposed in this series. I think if there's one avenue 100 Thieves should come in with the plan is to maybe attack Danny. I don't know necessarily how you would do that because, maybe Contracts has a plan to like defend Danny, and that's what they're coming in with. Yeah. But I still think that Evil Geniuses players just look way hungrier and want it more than 100 Thieves, so I'm going to give it to them. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a very close series.
Yeah, this is one of the ones I'm really excited for, yeah. I think, like you said, attacking Danny's an interesting angle because when we've seen EG falter, it's games like that Cinder game he had that they lost where he's put super far behind early. And what we've been hearing a lot of people say is that maybe Danny and Ignar aren't the most powerful laning duo, but they have that quality where in the late game team fights, Danny's going to be pumping out the damage on stuff like Aphelios. He's going to be the AD carry you need. I mean, that's all you need from your AD carry right now. You need him to not die in the team fights, pump out as much damage as he can while the rest of your more aggressive champions pylon. And that matches perfectly with like the super buff Chad topside of TL or of EG, who is just like my favorite part of LCS right now. Impact, Svenskar, and Jizuke are like they're so fun to watch. They just Impact has like taken he's masked off. He's like, I've been a tank player all this time. Psych! I'm the strongest carry player in the league, baby. Blah 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 blah. Anyway, yeah, I think Evil Genius is gonna win.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point about like Danny and Ignar maybe not having the strongest lane phase. Ignar kind of has been a pretty good roaming support the last few
Yeah, I
years of
agree.
his career. And Danny's a rookie, so like, when you have to lane like 1 versus 2 in some instances, you can also kind of get like a little bit thrown off. And on the other side, Huhi and FBI have really cemented themselves as one of the best duos in this league. And Huhi's actually had a lot of playoff experience, a lot of which coming from the mid lane back in the day on CLG. But
Yeah.
he's kind of really reinvented his career as a support. Yeah, I still think Evil Genius is going to take it, but they have 100 Thieves has a really solid roster from top to bottom. They have Reaper as coach. So definitely I'm expecting somewhat of a fight, but I think Evil Geniuses will take it. Anyways, the loser of Evil Geniuses versus Dignitas, who we're predicting to be Dignitas, will be going against Immortals. How do you see that series going?
I have trouble caring about it, to be honest, but I gotta give it to Immortals just on the face value of these teams. I think Dignitas is still floating a lot on that Dardoch slash Spring Split roster, which kind of inflated their win rate a lot. I don't know if they'd be in the position they are now without that, with the
Yeah,
value of their players now.
yeah,
It doesn't really feel like a cohesive whole to me. Was like my main point about Dignitas, which makes sense when you sub a player in like halfway through the split or a couple players in. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Immortals. I feel like they've been pretty promising. Insanity in the mid lane is kind of a bright spot. Never afraid to make that Tristana rocket jump in. Yeah,
yeah. And on top of like, thank God, seemingly underperforming this split and probably being one of the worst, if not the worst top laner in the LCS, I would argue.
yikes.
I think I think Immortals is going to take it. Not too confident about that, but I do have a point on Immortals and Rays, kind of unrelated but related. I think Rays has looked really good this split, kind of like unsung as being really good, but the last couple of weeks he looks really really bad. He was just consistently he's consistently getting caught. Like against FiQuest, he was taking these weird pathing during team fights, kind of like tactical last split, where you're like, what are you really doing? You're kind of trying to be, too aggressive, and then you end up inting. And he's
Yeah.
done that a lot the last 2 weeks, where I think he's just trying to do a little too much. And I also think this is kind of like shown in the championship picks. One of the reasons why he probably leans so heavily on Draven, who maybe I feel like is one. I feel like I heard it was his main for like a long time. He was a Draven one trick. I'm not completely sure on that, but like we can see it in Draven's like entire champion lore, because he's the
Wait,
epitome. Well, Draven's like the epitome of a feast or famine AD carry who Rays plays. They're the
yeah,
only team in the league that
yeah,
just
yeah,
listen. They're the only team in the league that plays Draven. His passive, he gets admiration stacks. Draven's the champion that wants to impress the crowd, and he's never afraid of like a fight, and he wants to like, gain all of that admiration. And a lot of his kit is built into that passive where you have a really strong lane phase, you deal a lot of damage, but during the team fights, when you have to focus on catching your axes and you have to reposition yourself, you just get stunned once, or you
yeah,
get slowed, so you can't hit one axe. You don't scale as well into the mid to late game in the team fights, and a lot of it comes down to like you want to get those early kills and those early golds from the admiration stacks. And I feel like Ray's kind of like embodies that, Draven's like identity as a player, where he's playing like really aggressive. He wants to carry the game. He wants all the admiration of the fans, but then you end up inting sometimes. But
yeah. um, yeah, I remember seeing his interview that he was saying, or an interview with him. He talked a little about Draven. So he definitely has an affinity for it. He was saying he thinks it's actually really or somewhat strong at least, and enough teams aren't playing it. But yeah, what's the last one? What's the last match? Let's see.
That's the last one.
Oh, that is? Okay. Well, unless you got anything else, Gregory.
That is all from me. This has been episode 16 of Double Buffs.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go.
See you next week.
Playoffs.